نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد بسم الله. So Surah Nuh, it's Makki Surah, Surah number 71, just 28 ayat and 2 ruku. And it is named after Nuh alayhi salam, because that's what the Surah begins with, the story of Nuh alayhi salam. And the connection of this Surah is that both Surah Nuh and previous Surah, Surah Ma'arij, mention the punishment described for disbelievers. And describes in Surah Ma'arij different nations that experience it, and here also the punishment given to the nation of Nuh alayhi salam. So at the end of Surah Ma'arij, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares that He, Jalla Shanahu, is capable of replacing a nation with better people. إِنَّا لَقَادِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَن نُبَدِّلَ خَيْرًا مِّنْهُمْ وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمَسْبُوقِينَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can replace disbelievers with a better people after them. So then in Surah Nuh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes how the people of Nuh, they were destroyed. And they were destroyed because of their disbelief. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaced all the upcoming generations with people who actually came along with Nuh alayhi salam in his ark. This surah nullifies the worship of idols through the story of Nuh alayhi salam. Gives the example of punishment of people of Nuh alayhi salam as a warning to the disbelievers of Makkah. And at the end of it, this surah includes the dua of Nuh alayhi salam for forgiveness of believers and destruction of disbelievers. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أرسلنا نوحا إلى قومه أن أنذر قومك من قبل أن يأتيهم عذاب أليم. Indeed, we sent Nuh to his people, saying, warn your people before there comes to them a painful punishment. So Nuh alayhi salam was born about 10 centuries after Adam alayhi salam. His people had become idol worshippers over the years. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his mercy sent his messenger Nuh alayhi salam to guide his people. Now, Nuh alayhi salam was an excellent speaker, and he had a very patient nature. He tried to guide his people by pointing out the wonders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how night and day followed each other. The night gives coolness in moments of rest. The day gives warmth and opportunity to seek provision. He explained to his people there cannot be more than one deity to run the mechanisms of this universe so uniformly. In short, he warned them not to worship idols, otherwise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send a terrible punishment to them. So because of his calling, people got divided into two groups. The first group was the one who believed in him, and they were generally the poor and of weak status in the society. But the second group, the rich and the strong, overlooked his warnings and continued their evil ways. In fact, they started to argue back with him. So their argument comes in Surah Hud. فَقَالَ الْمَلَأُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ قَوْمِهِ مَا نَرَاكَ إِلَّا بَشَرًا مِثْلَنَا وَمَا نَرَاكَ اتَّبَعَكَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ هُمْ أَرَاذِلُنَا بَادِيَ الرَّأْيِ وَمَا نَرَى لَكُمْ عَلَيْنَا مِنْ فَضْلٍ بَلْ نَظُنُّكُمْ كَاذِبِينَ. So the elites of Nuh alayhi salam, the elites of Nuh's people, who had refused to follow him, said, we merely consider you a human being like ourselves, nor do we find among those who follow you except the lowest of us, and they followed you without thinking. We see nothing in you to suggest that you are any better than us. Rather, we believe you to be liars. So they presented two arguments. You're like us, so there's nothing special about you, and you're being followed by poor and worthless people. Of course, Nuh alayhi salam persisted, and after much effort for almost 950 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala notified him that very few will accept the truth. So Nuh alayhi salam at that point made dua against his people and started to build the ark upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's order. He chose a place outside the city far from the sea to build this ark. And when people saw him building this boat, they started to mock him. They said things like, oh no, does this carpentry appeal to you more than prophethood now? Why are you building an ark so far from the sea? Are you going to drag it to the water, or the wind will carry it for you? So Nuh alayhi salam continued with the command of building the ark despite all this mockery. And finally, the punishment came in the form of flood. So when the signs of punishment showed, Nuh alayhi salam asked the believers to board the ark with him and took a pair of male and female of every type of animal, bird, and insect. So in the end, all of his people died except those who joined him on his ark. There are different opinions about how many people believed in Nuh alayhi salam. Ibn Abbas stated that there were about 80 people, while Ka'b al-Ahbar held that there were about 72 believers, and there are others who claim that there were only 10 believers with Nuh alayhi salam. So this is the brief story of the nation of Nuh alayhi salam. Let's continue with the rest of the surah. قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ إِنِّي لَكُمْ نَذِيرٌ مُبِينٌ. He said, O my people, indeed I am to you a clear warner. أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاتَّقُوهُ وَأَطِيعُونِ. Worship Allah, fear Him, and obey me. يغفر لكم من ذنوبكم ويؤخركم إلى أجل مسمى إن أجل الله إذا جاء لا يؤخر لو كنتم تعلمون. He will forgive you of your sins and delay you for a specified time. Indeed, the time set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes, will not be delayed, if only you knew. So notice here the use of this particle min. يغفر لكم من ذنوبكم. So min, like many particles, has different purposes. So you could consider this as min zaida, which means it is additional and does not give any extra meaning. And if that's what it is considered here, then the ayah would mean that all sins will be forgiven if you accept faith. Or what ulama say, the better usage here is min tabi'idiyya, which is only some of the sins would be forgiven, not all. So in this context, it will mean that the sins related to divine rights are forgiven, but any violation of human rights will remain unless one seeks forgiveness from that person whose rights were violated. And this meaning is also supported by a hadith narrated by Amr bin al-As, and Muslim Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, يغفر للشهيد كل ذنب إلا الدين. All the sins of a shaheed, martyr, are forgiven except debt. So Imam Nawawi says in Surah Muslim about this narration, the fact that Prophet ﷺ said except debt refers to all the rights of other people and highlights the fact that jihad, martyrdom, and other righteous deeds do not expiate sins having to do with the rights of other people. Rather, they expiate sins having to do with the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other words to focus on in this ayah are the two terms ajal and musamma. So ajal means a period and musamma means appointed or specified. So here, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is, if they embrace faith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not destroy them until a specified time. Otherwise, it will likely that they be punished and destroyed prior to their appointed time. Okay, so if they accept the faith, they will follow the natural time that is written for them. If they do not follow the faith and disobey, they will be punished and even destroyed sooner than the appointed time. So here we should understand this concept of taqdeer. So we see in different narrations that the lifespan of a person may change depending on the action he might take. So the idea is that a person's lifespan may be conditional on something. That he performs that action, his life increases, or as it decreases. And this is supported by an authentic hadith narrated by Anas bin Malik and Bukhari. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "Man ahabba an yubsata lahu fi rizqihi wa yunsa'a lahu fi atharihi falyasil rahimahu." Whoever loves that he be granted more wealth and that his lease of life be prolonged, then he should keep good relations with his kith and kin. Another narration, narrated by Thawban and Ibn Majah, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, لا يزيد في العمر إلا البر ولا يرد القدر إلا الدعاء وإن الرجل لا يحرم الرزق بالذنب يصيبه. Nothing increases one's lifespan except righteousness, and nothing repels the divine decree except supplication, and a man may be deprived of provision by a sin that he commits. So we generally know that life of every soul has a fixed term. So this may sound confusing to some people, how lifespan can extend or shrink. So let's understand this concept, which ulama explain in regards to taqdeer or predestination. So predestination has two types. There's what's called taqdeer mubram, definitive destiny, which is unalterable, does not change. And there's a second type, taqdeer mu'allaq, conditional destiny, which is order to which a condition is attached, right? So it is the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will happen, but it is based upon a certain condition. For example, imagine in Lawh Mahfuz, if it is written for someone, if this person obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his lifespan will be extended to 70 years. If he disobeys, he will pass away at 50. So here we can see how lifespan is conditional on the actions of the person. It comes in Surah Ra'd, يَمْحُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ وَعِنْدَهُ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eliminates what he wills or confirms. And with him is a mother of the book in which final destiny is recorded based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's infinite knowledge about which action a person will take. قَالَ رَبِّ إِنِّي دَعَوْتُ قَوْمِي لَيْلًا وَنَهَارًا. He said, my Lord, indeed I invited my people to truth night and day. Ibn Abbas says that Nuh alayhi salam was made prophet at the age of 40 years. So he lived for 950 years, but during his life, he never gave up the effort nor the hope. His people persecuted him, but he exercised patience. When the first generation of people failed him, Nuh alayhi salam continued his efforts with their children, and then with the third generation. So generally in his time, people did not live this long, but he was miraculously given a very long life. Nuh alayhi salam preached day in and day out. He spoke in public and private, individually and collectively. He reminded them of great favors and gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had bestowed upon them, and also great blessings that await them in paradise. But nothing made them move from their stance of disbelief. فَلَمْ يَزِدْهُمْ دُعَائِي إِلَّا فِرَارًا. But my invitation did not increase them except in flight or aversion. وَإِنِّي كُلَّمَا دَعَوْتُهُمْ لِتَغْفِرَ لَهُمْ جَعَلُوا أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ وَاسْتَغْشَوْا ثِيَابَهُمْ وَأَصَرُّوا وَاسْتَكْبَرُوا اسْتِكْبَارًا. And indeed, every time I invited them that you may forgive them, they put their fingers in their ears, covered themselves with their garments, persisted, and were arrogant with a great arrogance. So Sa'id bin Jubair and As-Suddi say that they covered their heads so that they could not hear what Nuh alayhi salam was saying. ثُمَّ إِنِّي دَعَوْتُهُمْ جِهَارًا ثُمَّ إِنِّي أَعْلَنْتُ لَهُمْ وَأَسْرَرْتُ لَهُمْ إِسْرَارًا. Then I invited them publicly. Then verily I proclaimed to them in public, and I appealed to them in private. So jihara means publicly, and israra means private. So you've probably heard the terms, jahri prayers and sirri prayers, referring to prayers in congregation where recitation by imam is audible or public, jahri, versus when the imam recites the recitation quietly or privately, called sirri. فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا. I said, ask forgiveness of your Lord. Indeed, He is ever a perpetual forgiver. يُرْسِلِ السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِدْرَارًا. He will send rain from the sky upon you in continuing showers. The word midrara means rain that comes one after another, so it's continuous. And scholars deduce from this verse that by repenting and asking for pardon of sins, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down abundant rain according to the need of time. وَيُمْدِدْكُمْ بِأَمْوَالٍ وَبَنِينَ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ جَنَّاتٍ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ أَنْهَارًا. And give you increase in wealth and children, and provide for you gardens, and provide for you rivers. مَا لَكُمْ لَا تَرْجُونَ لِلَّهِ وَقَارًا. What is the matter with you that you do not attribute to Allah due majesty? وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا. While He has created you in stages. So the word atwara refers to stages of human development, from sperm to hanging cloth to lump of flesh to the whole human being. The progressive development that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for humans. Atwara means multiple stages. أَلَمْ تَرَوْا كَيْفَ خَلَقَ اللَّهُ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ طِبَاقًا وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا. Do not consider how Allah has created 7 heavens in layers one upon the other, and made the moon therein a reflected light, and made the sun a burning lamp. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a distinction between moon and sun here in reference to lighting. They both have light, but serve different purpose. One of them brightens the night, and the other brightens the day. One of them gives warmth, and the other one is cool. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses different descriptors for light and for sun and moon in Surah Yunus, where it comes, هو الذي جعل الشمس ضياء والقمر نورا. So here, both words ضياء and nur are used for light. And the difference in the two is nur is a general word in meaning. So any light that is strong or weak, dim or clear can be referred to as nur. On the contrary, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used for shams, baw or diya, refers to light that is strong and clear, which is the light of the sun. وَاللَّهُ أَنْبَتَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ نَبَاتًا ثُمَّ يُعِيدُكُم فِيهَا وَيُخْرِجُكُم إِخْرَاجًا وَاللَّهُ جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ بِسَاطًا. And Allah has caused to grow you from the earth a progressive growth. Then He will return you into it and bring you out. And Allah has made for you the earth an expanse. That is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spread out the earth, leveled it, and stabilized it with firm mountains. Why? You learn in the next ayah, لِتَسْلُكُوا مِنْهَا سُبُلًا فِجَاجًا, so that you may tread its spacious path. Not only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spread the earth, He created pathways so we can travel and settle in different parts of the world. So let's look at the summary of these ayahs from 5 to 20. So dawah demands patience and perseverance. So Nuh alayhi salam for 950 years kept giving invitation to disbelievers, and he remained patient throughout. Also, we learn about how the disbelievers used to avoid and disrespect him by putting fingers in their ears or even covering their faces with cloth. Even then, wisdom of Nuh alayhi salam is then described on how they were avoiding him, and yet he continued to explain to them the benefits of forgiveness and the blessings of heavens and the earth and all the bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given to them in order to attract them to belief. And finally, the fact that resurrection is certain. So man has been created in multiple stages, and in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will return that person to the ground and then raise from the ground again. قال نوح رب إنهم عصوني واتبعوا من لم يزده ماله وولده إلا خسارا. Nuh said, My Lord, indeed they have disobeyed me and followed one whose wealth and children will not increase him except in loss. وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا كُبَّارًا, and they plotted a mighty plot. وَقَالُوا لَا تَذَرُنَّ آلِهَتَكُمْ وَلَا تَذَرُنَّ وَدًّا وَلَا سُوَاعًا وَلَا يَغُوثَ وَيَعُوقَ وَنَسْرًا. And they said, You shall not leave your gods, nor shall you leave Wad, nor Suwa, nor Yaghuth, nor Ya'uq, and Nasr. This ayah is mentioning names of 5 idols at the time of Nuh alayhi salam. Imam Baghawi says that these 5 idols were in fact about the 5 righteous people who lived between the time of Adam alayhi salam and Nuh alayhi salam. So people used to consider them pious. They respected them and followed on their footsteps. When they died, Shaitan misled people and had them carve out statues. So whenever people looked at these statues of the pious people, they would be reminded of how to worship like these people used to worship, and it would help them increase in the focus during worship. Slowly, the next generations forgot the original intent and began worshiping the statues as idols. Over time, even more idols were created. So from this story, I'm sure many of you would have deduced a very important lesson, as Imam Baghawi described here, about how what started as a good idea turned into something that took people away from religion. So there are many actions today that seem innocent or even beneficial to us, yet over time, they cause challenges. These actions could lead to issues in worldly matters, or they could be of religious nature, leading to bid'ah or innovation. So we have to be extremely careful in what we start as a tradition in our families. Because over many generations, you may have started with a very good intention and a particular mindset. They may get transformed into something that becomes a burdensome practice. As an example, this may give you an appreciation of why ulama recommend to avoid celebration of birthdays and anniversaries, since they have become a burden on people over generations, where high expectations are built around these events to the point where, on one hand, people feel deprived if no one celebrates for them. And on the other hand, others feel obligated every year to participate in birthdays and anniversaries as a means to show their affection. Yet clearly, these events were not given much importance by pious predecessors. A blatant form of bid'ah are events like Tija or Chehdum, organized on the 3rd and 40th day of someone's death in certain traditions in certain countries. And when they organize these events, they are considering them to be religious events with the hopes of getting a reward. Yet, such events have no place in our religion. They're indeed a bid'ah, an innovation that should be avoided. وَقَدْ أَضَلُّوا كَثِيرًا وَلَا تَزِدِ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا ضَلَالًا. And already they have misled many, and O Allah, do not increase the wrongdoers except in error. So the first part, وَقَدْ أَضَلُّوا, refers to idol worship that started in the time of Nuh alayhi salam and continues even until today. So indeed, they misguided many generations. The second part, Nuh alayhi salam is making a dua against his people, where he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase wrongdoers in their misguidance. But there's a paradox here. Prophets are sent to guide their nation, yet here Nuh alayhi salam is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for further misguidance of the sinners. How do we explain that? Well, the fact is, Nuh alayhi salam tried to call his people towards worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for hundreds of years, but they did not listen. Finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in Surah Hud that they will not accept guidance. وَأُوحِيَ إِلَى نُوحٍ أَنَّهُ لَنْ يُؤْمِنَ مِنْ قَوْمِكَ إِلَّا مَنْ قَدْ آمَنَ فَلَا تَبْتَئِسْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. And it was revealed to Nuh that no one will believe from your people except those who have already believed. So do not be distressed by what they have been doing. So Nuh alayhi salam, once he learned about this, about the confirmation that no one else will accept Islam, he made this dua for their final destiny to take over and finish them sooner. Now, as a da'i or caller to religion today, we cannot make the same dua for our Muslim brothers, regardless of how much we have tried already to persuade them against their open sins, because we do not know for certain how their end has been written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Instead, we should always remain optimistic for them to repent and revert. Narrated by Abdullah bin Masud in Bukhari, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, فَإِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ لَيَعْمَلُ بِعَمَلِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ حَتَّى لَا يَكُونُ بَيْنَهَا وَبَيْنَهُ إِلَّا ذِرَاعٌ فَيَسْبِقُ عَلَيْهِ الْكِتَابُ فَيَعْمَلُ بِعَمَلِ أَهْلِ النَّارِ فَيَدْخُلُ النَّارِ وَإِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ لَيَعْمَلُ بِعَمَلِ أَهْلِ النَّارِ حتى ما يكون بينها وبينه إلا ذراع فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل عمل أهل الجنة فيدخلها. So one of you may do good deeds that are characteristics of the people of paradise, so much that there is nothing except a cubit between him and paradise. But then what has been written for him decides his behavior, and he starts doing evil deeds, characteristics of the people of hellfire, and ultimately enters the hellfire. And one of you may do evil deeds, characteristics of the people of hell, so much so that there is nothing except a cubit between him and hellfire. Then what has been written for him decides his behavior, and he starts doing good deeds, characteristics of the people of paradise, and ultimately enters paradise. So we do not know how someone will end their life in this world. And just for clarity, what does the word cubit mean? It comes from the Latin noun cubitum, meaning elbow, and has many definitions, but a common or a natural cubit is considered the distance between the tip of your middle finger to the bottom of your elbow, so about 18 inches. So someone could be as close to going into hellfire, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written paradise for him, and he will change his action, so he will enter paradise. And billah, someone could be doing the good deeds entire his life, but towards the end of it, he has been written as someone from the hellfire. His actions will change and he will enter the hellfire. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give barakah in our actions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from any kind of bid'at and enter us into Jannah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم آمين